Penn State is a heavy favorite against Indiana. Now, Penn State's just that good going into this season, but I wouldn't sleep on the Hoosiers.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. It is a Locked On crossover to talk some Penn State and Indiana football. Never too early. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. He is Jacob Goins, host of Locked On Hoosiers. He's been on the Indiana beat for 3+ years now. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Thank you to the Everydayers for making us a part of your regular routine. We are your daily sources for all things Penn State and Indiana. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section, as well as let's talk about the lines that have been released here, Jacob.
Yeah.
As Penn State is a heavy favorite, and I think that's out of respect for Penn State. Because I look at this Indiana team and I say, do not sleep on the Hoosiers here, but Penn State is a 16.5-point favorite per our friends at FanDuel. The total is set at 53.5. So accordingly, we should expect some points there, but explain to others, I guess, why people should be bought into the fact that Indiana wasn't a fluke last season. And I think this team is actually better going into this year.
Yeah, well, luckily later in the episode, I'm going to let you kind of talk about your reason why you think Indiana is a good team from the outside. And I think that's an important factor here because there are a lot of people, Zach, who have seen Indiana football for what it's been for my lifetime and even other lifetimes, longer lifetimes. And they're like, look, that program just hasn't been good. They're not relevant. They don't win games. Nobody thinks about them. And I get that. That has been the history of Indiana football for a long, long time. But you make a new coaching hire in Curt Cignetti, you bring in a bunch of players, and you make a run to the college football playoff. It wasn't a fluke. You win that many games, and the way that you did it along the way, you can't fake that. You don't make that up. That doesn't just happen in today's era of college football. And you look at how good that Indiana team was, and I believe that this team is just as good, if not better, because of your quarterback situation, your receiver situation, your offensive line is going to be better than it was a year ago, which we saw against Ohio State and Notre Dame in the college football playoff. That was the issue, right? It was the big boys up front. We didn't have the dudes to compete there, and we knew that. And so I think the roster is in a really, really good spot. Curt Cignetti is one of the best coaches in the game, in my opinion, and people are bought into this program. Problem is, Zach, Indiana's not sneaking up on anybody this year. There's no surprises anymore about Indiana this year. You're going to get, I guess we are going to get everything from everybody, including Penn State when we have to go to Happy Valley, which is not an easy trip. I've been there. I've been to a whiteout game. It's wild in the atmosphere there. 16.5 sounds pretty respectful for now because that game is taking place in early November.
Early November, it's at Penn State, so you're going to give, I think that's 3.5 points each, it's 3.5 points away from the away team, and then 3.5 points for the home team. So it's essentially giving 7 points to the Nittany Lions in a way, which means that, okay, so if this was on a neutral field, this would be about a 9.5, 10 point game in favor of the Nittany Lions, which I think, on paper, that's fair. I don't look past this game truly. I think that Penn State is a team that is capable of going 12-0. Sooner rather than later, I think it's fair to give a schedule prediction. At least I should for Penn State this year. Sure. I would expect Penn State to beat Indiana, but I don't want to look past them. Whether that's because 2 years ago, Tom Allen nearly came into Beaver Stadium and upset them with an abysmal Hoosiers team. I do respect Curt Cignetti a lot. If you want to ask me right now, it's not about necessarily Indiana's football roster. It's about the guy that's leading them. And I think Curt Cignetti is one of the best coaches in all of college football. I would put him on tons of top 10 lists and not at the bottom.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a really, really good coach. I think he's a smart coach. I think he has, and I know that he has won everywhere he's been. And the question when he came in was, well, he coached at James Madison. Can he really can it translate? Can he win on the big stage in the Big Ten, which, as we have seen, is the best conference in college football? Can he win here? And early on, the signs say absolutely. But you have to continue that success. He's come in, he's got money, he's got investment, he's got support, everything you need to begin to build a brand and a culture in a football program. And Curt Cignetti is doing that in Bloomington. Am I expecting this to be the greatest program that's ever been built and just win back to back to back national titles? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I think expectations have been raised across the board, and going in and competing in a game like this for Indiana on the road at Penn State, but remind me, Nittany Lions coming off a game against the Buckeyes in this situation, you have an opportunity to make a statement, go in and compete and give yourself a shot. And you just never know what's going to happen in November. All I'm asking for is Indiana to have a say in the college football playoff race again this year, and a game at Penn State in early November is a perfect way to do that.
Now, I have the utmost confidence in Penn State. Again, this is a team that has its entire nucleus back. Drew Allar, three-year starter with the same program. That's going to be fairly unheard of in this day and age of college football.
Rare. Yep. You
return your two-headed monster co-starters for the past 4 years. So we want to talk about how unorthodox it is to have someone like Allar back at QB. Find me a time, Jacob, where you have two co-starters at running back for all 4 years together. That's probably unheard of since the beginning of college football because of the NFL. It's not even about the transfer portal. Someone's going to know. It's about the fact that one person's eventually going to go to the NFL, or if they are this good, they will both go to the NFL together. The fact that they're here starting 4 consecutive years together speaks volumes. So that's what I want to know about Indiana initially is, can they stop the run? I mean, Penn State's going to be built behind an elite offensive line and not one, but 2 elite running backs. So they don't necessarily need to throw a lot with Drew Allar because they're just going to run the football at everybody. So can Indiana stop the run?
Better than they did in years past. Last year, they were actually pretty good about, if you remember, statistically, Indiana was one of, if not the best defense in college football because of what they did against the teams that they did it against. But yes, I do believe that Indiana will be able to stop the run. I think that's going to be their focus on defense. And while you do feel comfortable with the guys in the secondary who can hold it down back there, you have to be able to stop the run against the likes of Penn State and Nebraska and teams like that are in this conference. And I think Indiana can. You bring back Michael Kamara, who's going to compete to be an All-American this year on the defensive line. I think that's where old school head football coach Curt Cignetti and his staff, they're going to stop the run. They're going to do what they can to not let that happen. And in a game on the road where Penn State will turn around and hand it off 100 times in their home stadium, you're going to have to if you're the
Might as well.
So I'm confident that we can. Yep. It just depends on, can we do it 30, 40, 45 times against the Nittany Lions? I really don't know. We're going to just have to wait and see.
You bring up another intriguing part of this matchup is that Penn State will be returning from Columbus, and that game very well might define just how great or how good their season is, at least in the regular season. And is that going to be a turning point for Penn State, defeating the team, but then using all of that juice, using all of that energy, as we've seen before, that Penn State does not respond very well after they lose to the Ohio State Buckeyes. So this isn't a team. Indiana's not going to be sleepwalking into Beaver Stadium. They're going to sense that, okay, there's no bye here. Yeah. They're going to have to go in. They're going to have to play us, a pretty competent team, after facing the team that's been a thorn on their side for a better part of the decade. So we know that Penn State, that doesn't line up very well for them, but I am not looking past this Indiana team. But let's get more into that. Break down some X's and O's. Quarterback, Mendoza coming over from Cal.
Yeah.
But now he's got a real team around him to do some damage. We're going to talk more about this Penn State Indiana matchup coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover.
Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with your friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. Well, that's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress. And with the money that you save on tickets, you can splurge on food or drinks or merchandise or even invite more people to come and be a part of the action with you. Game Time makes all of that possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last minute deals, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. I use Game Time on every single event possible. Sports, music, comedy, theater. I've used it dozens of times. Never had an issue. They are the place to go. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKED. ONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Over edition. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. He is Zach Seyko of Nittany Lions. We continue talking Indiana and Penn State. And there's no secret, Zach, the expectations are through the roof for this Penn State football team. You know that better than anybody, as well as your fans and your listeners, because this seems to be the year, right? This seems to be the year for Penn State, for James Franklin, for everybody there. It's now or never, right there in Happy Valley, with all the expectations, the win totals, the projected lines we're talking about. I mean, everything seems to be riding on 2025 for James Franklin at Penn State. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're absolutely right on the money to say that. I mean, Penn State's all in here. Penn State there's kind of this back and forth in recruiting about, oh, Penn State doesn't have the NIL to keep up with where most fans would like them to be in recruiting. But that's because they emptied the reserves to retain this nucleus for 2025 that I mentioned only the slightest, a sliver of it. Okay, right. Drew Allar. Quarterbacks are expensive. I imagine Drew Allar's commanding more than that $3.1 million that On3 has him valued at. Yeah. So quarterbacks are expensive. He might be very well making more in NIL for this season because he was going to be a first-round draft pick. That's a lot of money that he's leaving on the table. So Penn State had to compensate him some way. Same thing with Singleton. Same thing with Allen. And that's the offense. And we're not even talking about O-linemen. Okay, Drew Shelton, starter. Vanga Uwane, starter. Nolan Rucci, starter. So multiple starters on the offensive line. Nick Dawkins as well. I want to give him his respect. That's 4 starters on the offensive line that, in theory, could have gone into the draft. But it did benefit them to come back to Penn State for another season. You still got to pay them some NIL. Then you flip it over to the defense. Deni Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, Zachy Wheatley, all of those guys would have been drafted in a respectable spot. Were they guaranteed first-round picks, second-round picks? Probably not. I think there's a case for a Deni Dennis Sutton to go as high as the second or third round in this draft.
Okay.
But now all those guys come back. Not only can they boost their resumes and potentially get selected a lot higher if things go well, but they're just going to be better. Again, if they were going to be drafted in this year's NFL draft cycle, imagine what they're going to be with another season of college football under their belt. So they're only going to get better. Chemistry, longevity, every rep, whether it's in practice or actually on game day, goes a long way. So this Penn State team is, in my mind, number 1, a number 2 team going into the season because of everything they brought back. They're not breaking in a new quarterback. They're not breaking in. Yes, they're breaking in a new defensive coordinator with Jim Knowles, but he's not rebuilding the defense. The big concern is that, Jim Knowles, his plan takes 3 years. Penn State's going to be a bad defense or a middle of the road defense because Jim Knowles' system is too complex to learn. Jim Knowles took over a top 50 defense at Ohio State. He's taken over a top 10, conservatively speaking, defense at Penn State, and they've been using his system. So Penn State has all the puzzle pieces here. They've gone all in. They intend to win a national title, and if you do, you will reap the benefits of that. Recruiting, fan buy-in, not as much smack talk about James Franklin. You will see. But what happens if they fall short? What happens if they don't get to the national championship game?
Yep,
There is major egg on everybody's face if they do not at least get to the title game.
So, I mean, are you safe to say or comfortable in saying what your opinion is if they don't win it? I mean, because everything you just laid out is kind of what I expected and then some. I mean, you're literally putting everything on this season for Penn State, where all the bad rep for James Franklin that he can't win the big ones, he can't win it all, he can't get. If it doesn't happen, are you saying that if it's not now, it really is never for James Franklin? Would they do the crazy thing and consider moving on from this guy?
So they wouldn't move on from him, but you also kind of just accept the territory that you're in. I don't know how Penn State would view that. It would just be a bitter pill to swallow that, oh, Penn State is stuck in this purgatory of you're not elite, you're in tier 2. And for a lot of other programs, that'd be great. Pitt would love to go 10-2. Maryland would love to go 10-2. Be a perennial team that makes hey, we're a favorite to be in the college football playoff, but that's not good enough for Penn State. And I totally understand that. When you were a title contender year in and year out in the 80s and 90s, you're going to expect that as long lifetime Penn State fans. And James Franklin hasn't lived up to that for a variety of reasons. I think a lot of them are circumstantial. I don't directly blame James Franklin for the lack of success. I think that he's put Penn State above the bar for success at this point in time. But I'm going to eat my words if they don't. I would say the very minimum, they have to get to the semifinal. I do say it's national title or bust, because why invest in the defensive coordinator? Why invest in all of these stars and these veterans to come back? Retain Andy Kotelnicki when he could have been a head coach in this offseason cycle? Why do all of that just to finish in 4th? Why?
I'm with you. And look, I think there are a select few programs, whether it's in college football, college basketball, heck, you could even talk professional sports as well. There are a select few groups of teams, in my opinion, Zach, that can go into every season and say that statement that it's championship or bust. I don't know if I'm willing to say Penn State's there every year, but they are this year. With everything you've talked about, they are there this year. And call me crazy, I don't think the schedule is all that difficult. I mean, you go to Ohio State, but you get Oregon at home, you get Indiana at home, you get Nebraska at home. I mean, what an opportunity.
It's an easy game.
No, but you do get it at home. At least you get to play at Happy
I know what you mean. Yeah, favorable circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Favorable circumstances. Little weird trip out there to the UCLA, though. Got to go play at the Rose Bowl. So, I mean, not the worst schedule in the world is what I'm getting at here.
No, it's not. I think I saw, again, there are so many analytical sources now at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Someone says that this is a top 20 strength of schedule. I think I saw somewhere it was 33rd. That's fair. I think that's pretty fair, because it's still the Big Ten. You still face Oregon. That is going to be that's going to be a top 5 matchup at that time.
Awesome.
Ohio State's going to be a top 5 matchup. So you have 2 top 5 games. And again, if Indiana gets hot, there's a very good chance that could be a top 10 game. I think it'll be a top 15 game at a minimum by that time. Again, it depends on how everything shakes out for Indiana, but it's not like, okay, Penn State's playing Michigan, they're playing USC, they're playing Illinois, they're playing all of these dark horse contenders in the Big Ten. They're playing Indiana, that's one of them. You know what Ohio State and Oregon are going to give you as juggernauts. But again, there's no Michigan. What can Michigan be this year? What can Illinois be? I think Iowa's kind of quietly being overlooked, maybe as, hey, this team could be 9-3 as opposed to 6-6, right? Kind of thing.
Sure.
They're just not playing the teams in the Big Ten that, they're going to surprise you. Well, I guess Iowa's one of them. They're playing at Kinnick. So I mentioned Iowa. Nebraska could be a team that you really don't want to play at the end of the season. Yeah. But do I really want to sit here and overhype the Cornhuskers at this time? But no, that's a team I'd rather face in the first half of the season as opposed to the second half.
Yeah, and so you take the schedule, which is manageable, a team that is stacked, and a coaching staff that is truly off the books. I mean, it is all there for Penn State to be successful in 2025, and that means being successful at the very top, which means winning a national title. And while we may not have that expectation at Indiana here in Bloomington, we are talking making the college football playoff again. Not many people are. but you are Mr. Seyko. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about the Hoosiers right after this here on a Locked On crossover episode.
Jacob, when I look at this Indiana team, why I am bought into them is because this roster is better. I'll see the position group rankings. You're the insider here, so you know better than I will, but I respect the offense first and foremost. I think where I want to see Indiana, or at least I want to see where they're tested, is defensively, which is why right out of the gate, hey, can they stop the running game first and foremost? Not even Penn State's, just anybody else's. It's the fact that they might be able to win. They might be able to will their way to some victories with the offense. Now, breaking in a transfer quarterback is going to be easier said than done, but I think Fernando Mendoza can be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten, if not in all of college football, because of what Curt Cignetti is. He's just a really good coach.
Yep.
Probably there's different kinds of coaches, Jacob, because do I think James Franklin is a better overall coach than Curt Cignetti? Yes. But do I think that Curt Cignetti is a better game day coach than James Franklin? Yes. Okay. So there's a coach that's better at running a program and consistently in terms of being able to lead that program overall. I still want to see that more from Signetti because he hasn't been in the Power 4 level, the Power 2, the Big Ten for very long.
Especially in today's era too, with so many changing things and NIL and now revenue sharing and all of that. I'm with you on that.
So, but when we get to game day, actual game day, I do worry about that. Is Signetti going to be able to outcoach James Franklin? It does help that Penn State. See, I don't worry about that as much because James Franklin now has Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles on the sideline or in the press box. But I don't overlook Bryant Haynes. That was somebody that Penn State was looking at as a potential defensive coordinator replacement before Jim Knowles had emerged. Thank goodness they were patient and thank goodness they waited because now everybody's happy. You get to keep your guy. Penn State gets somebody that I think is better. But Mendoza, I think, is the key. If you can get him firing on all cylinders, Indiana's offense is going to be very tough to stop. And I think, like I said, they can outscore some opponents to get them some surprise victories.
Fernando Mendoza is a quarterback that is not going to just blow you away. This isn't the dual threat guy. This isn't a Justin Fields. This isn't anything like that where he's just going to light the world on fire. Not at all. But he doesn't have to do that. Folks, this is a guy that was winning games at California. He was winning games out there.
No supporting cast.
Nothing, not a thing. And he went on the road to an SEC team and got a win early last year. That means something to me. And I think it should mean a lot of things to fans as well, because he is now stepping into an offense that was putting up stupid numbers a year ago. Your offensive line has improved with 3 starters you added through the transfer portal, the highlight being Pat Coogan from Notre Dame. He's going to be your starting center this year. You bring back 2 of your top receivers from last year, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper. Can't complain of having 2 playmakers on the outside. And a running back room that I think is going to be by committee early, but could see a couple of names emerge. And so all that being said, I've said this all offseason long, and this will be the case when we come to Happy Valley, whether it is Indiana's undefeated, whether we're 500, doesn't really matter. He makes good decisions with the football in his hands, Zach. Fernando Mendoza just does the right thing, makes the right play, and doesn't turn the football over. And on the road in this conference in general, but especially there at Penn State, you cannot turn the ball over, man. Those crazy fans will take advantage, and Penn State's too good of a team to not score off of those opportunities. And so I think this team goes as Fernando Mendoza goes. And that's the Penn State game. That's the entire schedule as a whole, because like we saw a year ago, I think Indiana's defense is going to be really, really solid. There will be very few instances where we look at a game or the result and say, man, the defense just didn't do its job. The defense just didn't hold up. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I'm sure you guys feel similar there for Penn State as well. If this team puts up numbers and moves the football and can score, we're going to have a chance to beat anybody on our schedule, including Penn State on the road. It's a tall task. The line's 16.5 for a reason. It could grow or shrink before we get there, but I firmly believe that Indiana's season is dependent on how good Fernando Mendoza will be in his first year in Bloomington. I really do.
And like I say, with just young quarterbacks or teams with a new system, they're only going to get better as the season goes along.
Yep.
So the more reps, the more snaps, the more practices that Mendoza goes through and builds that chemistry, builds that rapport with everybody, the OC, wide receivers, working with the O-line, all of that. You don't want to, if I'm Penn State, I would rather play Indiana at the beginning of the season as opposed to later on in the season, and especially after that Ohio State game with no bye week in between. Whether or not that game goes right or wrong for Penn State, because I'm easily going to make that argument. Hey, Penn State just went on the road. They beat Ohio State. How do you match that intensity with this is a massive letdown spot. If you beat Ohio State, all right, say they lose to the Buckeyes, then you're coming in because you lost to the Buckeyes, and it's the same thing. It's the same story over and over again. How do you follow up the game that defines your season for Penn State? Everybody has, I get the 1-0 mentality from the Penn State side of it,
right?
But you know darn well that everybody in that locker room has the Buckeyes circled, which means that Indiana's not going to get the same type of intensity, the same type of reps leading up to it.
And I'll say this too, as we wrap up, this is not the first tough road game that Indiana has on the schedule. We do play some, we go to Iowa, we go to Maryland, places like that, but we go to Eugene. We have to travel out to Oregon and take on the Ducks halfway through the season. And so my hope is a trip to Iowa, which is always a tough place to play, and going out to Oregon, which is a really tough place to play with a really, really good football team. Yeah. My hope is that Indiana is battle tested and ready. My hope is that they don't walk in and just be completely starstruck and just be shocked at what they see. I think Penn State is the toughest place to play in the Big Ten. But you're hoping, or my hope is that Indiana is ready for it by the time you get there. This is the third to last game of the year, November 8th. If you're not ready at that point, you're never going to be ready. And I think the intensity of this game depends on how good Penn State is at that point. You've talked about the Ohio State game, which I think has a huge factor here. But what is Indiana's record at this time? Is Indiana undefeated? Awesome. We're talking top 10 game. It's going to be all over the place. It will be hyped up like crazy. Is Indiana struggling at this point? Did we go on the road and lose to Iowa? Did we get blown out by Oregon? Have we tripped up against UCLA or Michigan State, right? That has so much to do with what this game between our two squads could be. But, man, I'm so excited for it. And I don't want to wish away the games beforehand, but I cannot wait to have this game where Indiana comes and takes on Penn State. And maybe a whiteout? Maybe? Possibly?
Well, Oregon will be the whiteout for Penn State, but it will certainly, it would not shock me if that was the stripe out game or another type of theme game. Yeah. It does have to do with the weather, honestly, but because, I mean, the way we framed it now, Indiana could come in with one loss. Penn State could either be undefeated or coming off of a loss to that Ohio State team. So to a battle of 0 and 1 loss teams, a battle of 2 1-loss teams, it is very possible. That's why we say, do not sleep on the Indiana Hoosiers. Last season was not a fluke. This team will look to capitalize, even though Penn State is the favorite, should be the favorite. Do not overlook Indiana, even this early. That's going to do it for this Locked On crossover. Again, we are your daily sources for all things Penn State and Indiana. He is Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. My name is Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. Thank you to every one of you who checked out this episode. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. And for more conversations around Penn State, Indiana, keep it right here on both Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On Hoosiers.